Hi everyone. This is Dânia. I am back now with my interviewee, Yonah Welker. He is working on frameworks and guidelines related to human, women, children, disability rights behind technology, AI, and social robotics, not only across classrooms or workplaces, but in the scope of smart cities and factories in the European Union and beyond. Welcome, Yonah.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Yes, I would like to start talking briefly about the issue of representation and what do you understand as algorithmic diversity?
Yes, thank you so much for this question. First of all, I became involved in this topic many years ago. I spent many years in technology world, and typically when we start to explore accessibility problem, disability on the workplace, and technology behind it, we found many good news. For instance, Microsoft and Amazon just introduced new systems. They appointed people with disabilities for some key positions. At the same time, we see social robotics at schools. We see experiment with the biofeedback when we can use your brain in order to control synthesizer and many types of comprehensive technology. But if we go closer to the problem, we explore that 90% of people with autism are not employed. Only 1 of 10 people with different type of disabilities actually have an access to inclusive technology. And if we go deeper to ethical problems behind it, we explore that we had no any ethics frameworks, for instance, related to AI in children. Only in 2020, UNICEF came up with a framework that actually includes recommendation for organizations, for public and private entities, how exactly to create technologies in this field. So basically, though people from MIT, Harvard, Oxford, Stanford worked on this technology previously, they had no any guidelines and rules how to actually be aligned with the human rights, with the anti-cyberbullying policies, harassment, mental health and well-being. And for instance, I'm actively involved in projects related to hackathons, and many young people try to come up with the solutions related to accessibility, mental well-being on workplaces, disability. But at the same time, we're not even able to share anything for focus on the guidelines, how to exactly be aligned with the policies. Because, for instance, in European Commission, in many projects driven by European Commission and funded by EU, we have an ethics criteria to evaluate educational technology for schools, for disability, for autism. But in most cases, it's a knowledge for evaluators, but not for startups, not for founders, not for innovators, for developers. And unfortunately, one of the biggest challenges just behind it is actually the lack of representation. And not only and we can divide it on several levels. On the basic levels, gender, which what we typically talk about, only 50% of data science teams and AI teams presented by women. But actually, if we go further, we explore issues related to disability, narrow representation, but also general, let's say, division between ecosystems. So if we talk about accessibility technology, academia world works, let's say, in isolated way, research world, venture world, AI world, they're not connected. So in most cases, voices of people from hackathons, technologists, and many young people who are passionate to bring the change to classrooms, to workplaces, were not heard, and policies are not aligned. So
That's true.
the significant part of my work is to connecting these dots, is to go into hackathons or organizing these hackathons or working with the accelerators or screening teams and connecting guidelines and frameworks with all of his problems. And I'm a disabled person myself, and I spent most of my life in an isolated way trying to figure out how people like me can, let's say, get access to education, to work, jobs. Because though now many organizations try to say like, we're open to everyone, we price remote working. It's not true. Until 2019, until COVID-19, it was extremely difficult to find a job in remote way if you're not developer, for instance. And many people with the physical limitation, mental disabilities, and any type of, let's say, underrepresented groups, they were completely isolated from job, learning, medical opportunities, social service, and so on. And basically, significant part of this problem is to connecting these dots.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for that. I can say that that resonates with me, and it's one of the motivators for founding the AI Guild community, because we don't want to, like you were saying, leave people behind. What we want to do is connect the dots. So we are a community for data practitioners in technical roles, but also in business roles and in management roles, because the idea is that we need to grow this ecosystem to be able to push forward the deployment of data analytics, of machine learning and AI solutions. And what we want to do, like the mission of the AI Guild, is not only to advance AI adoption, but really to do it for the benefit of humanity. We want to do ethical applications of AI that contribute to the public good and the progress of the society, because we want to be part of, or we want to be proud of being part of building the society that we live in. So we are pretty much a diverse community in terms of gender, but also in terms of nationalities. We are from different backgrounds also. So yeah, I think that we also spoke about it in another session, but there is this narrow definition of diversity that is happening right now, mostly focused on gender and ethnical diversity, but there's a lot more to that. Like personally, I can say that I have felt this gender and ethnical diversity issue from my background as being a woman in tech, also from being Brazilian or Latin American, working now in Germany. So I think there's a lot of different cultural and also different ways of thinking. I would like then to take our conversation to the next step, which is, okay, once we are aware that we are in this ecosystem and that there are all those differences, how can we provide, like, what do you think can be something practical for us to think about? For example, going in direction of the hackathons and connecting the dots, bringing more education to people, or even making the practitioners and the companies more accountable for what they are building and for what they are building,
Yes, it's a wonderful question. And first of all, in previous years, I had opportunity to think about it a lot because, and the reason why I'm actually started to combine different activities on the intersection of venture capital, technology, and ethics. I explored that this world is extremely disconnected, and then we try, for instance, incubate startups and, for instance, introduce ethics professionals to them. It doesn't work because until we actually try to educate each team member or create, let's say, ecosystem of bioethics, understanding on human rights for everyone, including CTO, designers, developers, it just doesn't work. So basically, I see it as a combination of steps that includes frameworks and guidelines which actually propose not only, let's say, on the internet or as a white papers or ebooks, but on the academic level, at school level, and hackathon level. So on any level, starting from, let's say, 8 or 9, 10 years old. So then kids start to build robots. We're able to learn about ethical use of technology and how it can contribute to the society. And interesting enough, I believe that generations that is actually is pretty aware about it. 1 year ago, I had an interview with Meira. She's one of the youngest AI inventors. She was like 11 years old to the moment
Well,
of this interview. And I was surprised how she aware about social impact and how AI should serve to philanthropy, social impact, responsibility, environment. And she said that actually she built technology to serve the good, and she tried to combine, let's say, serving underrepresented communities in technology progress at the same time. So I believe this mindset is already a part of a Generation Z, and the first step is actually schools, universities, academia world, ecosystems, hackathons, communities, where we just spread it to someone who are not aware about it. But I believe I'm pretty sure with the next generation are, let's say, more responsible and natively understand the combination of social and technology aspects. Second thing is that I mentioned is a representation. There's a great phrase that nothing about us without us. So if you build technology for neurodiverse people, you can't do it without neurodiverse people in your team, in your research team, because you're not able to ask correct questions in order to build your training data, correct research, labeling, until you actually have people who have empathy. Because I believe it's impossible to learn empathy. You're able to experience it. So
yes,
until you came through this experience, you're able to understand the problem and ask correct question, input it to the training data, which became a part of the smart glasses, robots, adaptive learning, or some interactive books for autistic children. Third thing, what I consider very important, and this experience comes from my work on the personalization in data science, is a avoiding of a filter bubble in echo chamber in the teams. I'm a strong advocate of open source movement over decentralized teams. When we have a truly diverse teams, you mentioned that currently we're mostly focused on ethnic and gender aspects, ignoring, let's say, aspects of experiences, intercultural exchange. And I believe when we, let's say, start to create some kind of stigmas in terms of our frameworks, and they're not flexible, it's not very productive. So we should be very open to new ideas, and both in terms of let's say how our team participate in discussion, and in terms of stakeholders. So we don't create a filter bubble inside of our ecosystem. So our bioethics or ethical guidelines and rules are very flexible to changing environment. Another thing is a culture and accessible moral vocabulary, which we built based on this ecosystem. So what exactly I mean? I believe that currently we have a strong disconnection between technology, liberal arts, and social science. Many people who have education in philosophy, history, and
okay,
many type of liberal arts, they have no perspective to become, let's say, part of a technology world, or they typically said like you can become marketers, growth hackers, business developers. For sure, now they have a, let's say, opportunity to become ethics professionals. But before that, we had no, let's say, any type of occupation or a type of a professional involvement of not technology people into technology teams. So in the end, we create situation that we have a technology people would actually don't understand society and have no, not only understanding gender, cultural, ethnic studies and other in different studies, but also correct vocabulary to
yes,
operate research interviews, understand tasks. So that's why we had a significant disconnection between researchers, CTOs, product managers. We talk different languages
yes,
because
for
we come
sure.
from different backgrounds, and they have no common understanding. And in most cases, it become a source of another problem, is a technical fixes. So for instance, if a non-tech person come with comment that something doesn't work, and it was, let's say, from moral or ethical nature, technology person thought that we just need another feature or update. They don't understand that we're not able to fix everything with technology. Maybe the whole mechanism is not correct. Maybe we need to solve the whole funnel of building or research or aspect how we work with the people. So with this connection of the visions, philosophy of design thinking, it's really crucial. And that's why, for instance, when I start to work with the women in AI, one of the key ideas was to say we build not for women, but by women, in order to demonstrate how, for instance, different backgrounds can bring more perspective of design thinking to
Yes.
healthcare, to education. Because in most cases, when we try to talk about diversity, we just try to clone men and create, let's say, women. We have a Superman and we create super women in Hollywood, but maybe it could be super nurse or super doctor or super teacher. Why do you think we should the same role models with same
Yes.
solutions with same products? You just copy paste it and change the gender. But why do you think it should be the same design thinking, the same philosophy, with same values? Maybe it's different values. So
Yes.
it's another
Thank you for
problem.
that.
Yeah, and another thing is a principle of discriminatory non-harm is accountability. So on one thing, on any stage of working with our audience, customers, we should be assured that we don't make any kind of a negative impact. So typically we use assessment of impact tools, questionnaires, but at the same time, we should understand who's accountable. Because on
Yes.
one hand, we have a wonderful movies like Coded Bias, which bring awareness, but let's say they still too focus on saying that AI and algorithm are not good, but they forget to say who behind this problem. And it's one of the key problem we have, who's actually responsible. Because from legal perspective, AI is not a subject of the law, is an object, it's just a tool. And if someone dying in medical environment, doctor is responsible, not the tool. And the same with educators. If a social robot doesn't work properly in the classroom or educational environment, responsible person is a teacher. And the same with the adaptive learning in platforms. We should understand the logic of accountability. Should it be some specific
Yes.
person, product manager, CEO? It's a huge discussion. And I
Yes.
believe it is the whole reshaping of a vision of technology team. It's not just the developers, it's not just the building MVP and selling it to the market as soon as possible in order to ensure we have a proper metrics for investors. As the whole cycle of responsibility of consequences of this technology.
Yes.
Because few years ago, I had a talk with a person who led a social justice technology accelerator in Netherlands. And I asked her about Theranos. It was a bubble in health tech. And I asked her what she thinks about this problem and such type of, let's say, not ethical technology. And she said, "Oh, I wrote this book." She mean the Bad Blood book about Theranos scandal. And I said, "No, I don't mean the book. I don't mean the scandal. I mean this technology, not correct blood tester, could lead to thousands of deaths because blood testing is a crucial element for any kind of diagnosis in
Yes.
oncology, immune disorders, and so on. So you only focus when it was a $3 billion scandal. So now technology came into some kind of a storytelling scope. Nobody cares about actual consequences for society. People just
Yes.
talk about unicorns, rounds, billions, superhero CEOs, and so on. And they try to create another role model for that. I believe is extremely harmful for society because behind it, they have suicides in technology teams, mental health issues, negative social impacts, millions of dollars of spent without any positive impact, but with great promises of visionaries and so on. So
Yes.
it's a kind of a main thing. For sure, there are more elements, but we're pretty limited in terms of timing. So I would love to
Yes.
save
Thank
time
you.
for other questions.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Yonah. There were a lot of insights that you brought, and I think I would be able to unpack each one of those into other 30-minute sessions. But as you mentioned, we have a limited time for today. We do have another 1 or 2 minutes if someone that is watching wants to send their questions to you. And while we wait for some questions to come up, I just want to mention that the things that you were saying, especially about accountability and who is responsible for what is being done, it reminds me a lot of the social media example about the spread of misinformation and inflammatory content, especially when we think about Facebook and that article that was uncovered by the MIT Technology Review this year in March, when they were saying about the responsible AI team in Facebook that was led by one of the or the main research engineer that built the news feed algorithm and so on. So they were really focused on working on this intersection of AI and society, right? And he had like okay to do whatever he thought was fit to address the issues of AI and society with his team. But in the end, there was a lot of limitation because of not getting buy-in or financial support for the project because they were not directly improving Facebook's growth. So in the end, the models were not deployed because they were not really helping on engagement. So not only growing engagement, but sometimes like by filtering out inflammatory content, you were actually driving engagement down. So in the end, because that was not sustaining the business, not bringing in more engagement, they basically don't care about the inflammatory content that they're letting run free on their platform. This is something that needs to be accountable.
Yes, and I would love to share a quick comment. Actually, it was a part of a Facebook vision from the beginning. In the start of the growth of the Facebook, we always had a one metric, and it was a growth. The goal was become the biggest social network in the world. And there was the whole rumors about that during business meetings, we always state we don't care about sales, we don't care about revenue, but becoming the biggest social network in the world. So everything should be dedicated to this goal. And now we have another. So there they achieve this goal. They have another goal is to increase engagement because it's directly lead to the more revenue from advertising. So
Yes.
yeah, and it's a pretty classical for them.
Yes, just before we leave, I want to address a question from the chat. Chilan is asking, if a doctor uses an AI application to diagnose an illness and it happens to be inaccurate, who is liable? Is the doctor responsible for understanding intricacies of AI? What do you think about it?
Yes, it's actually was a part of framework I'm working on, and it's called this problem is called supremacy of algorithms. So very often AI leads to the troubles and mistakes in education and healthcare. For instance, there was a case that an AI fired several teachers, and at the same time, due to the not really good interface, it wasn't able to provide even arguments behind it. So let's say it wasn't transparent enough, and content which was produced for stakeholders was not really good. So in most cases, the responsible person is a doctor, is a person, is a human, and which why we come up with a thing which is called a double check principle. Then everyone in education and healthcare and security, police, when we use technology would directly affect human lives or just general safety in an environment, we should provide the double check parameter from a human, from a person, from a professional who have a deep level of understanding of a problem, is able to check it manually. So
Yes.
yes, we're not able to delegate any kind of responsibility and accountability to technology. So that's why we discuss all of this, because we have no people who are able to take this responsibility now, both due to the lack of expertise and the flaw. We create technology in order to automate or make the process autonomous in order to improve our revenues, because people need salaries, and we would love to eliminate some people from the floor, but now we explore it is impossible because system make mistakes and we need to introduce people again, but it's about increasing your costs again, and now we have a conflict. And I hope, and hopefully, European Union has a pretty strong vision that responsibility should overcome revenues, even though it decreases your profits. But your responsibility in consequences is much more important. Unfortunately, in the United States, this vision is different and it's still more focused on profits. It's a significant problem.
Yes. Well, just for the audience, if you are interested in keeping up the conversation with Yonah, I really appreciate you giving the time and also being flexible to change and do your interview earlier with me. But everyone can also find you in the networking area. We are going to have now a 15-minute break for networking and for visiting the expo area. And I would like to remind you to please check out the Daily booth and the video with more details about the partnership and book a conversation with me to make season 2 happen. Yeah. Thank you so much, Yonah, for your insights. It was really good to hear from you. Thank you.
It was a pleasure.